Welcome to Travel Around the Block. Join Joel, Mike, and their guests as they explore how Web3 and AI are reshaping the way we journey, invest, and connect across the globe. This episode is sponsored by Lumo. Powered by AI, Lumo makes it possible for travelers and travel managers to predict, avoid, and manage flight disruptions. Visit thinklumo.com.
Welcome and welcome back to Travel Around the Block, your front row seat to the stories behind today's most exciting travel innovators. We're your hosts, Joel and Mike, and we're delighted to introduce this episode's special guest, Charlie Sullivan, the Managing Director of Vacation Genie. Charlie brings nearly 35 years of experience in travel tech, having held leadership roles across the industry. As SVP of e-commerce at a major global distribution system, he helped drive the growth of some of the world's largest travel e-commerce brands. Before joining Vacation Genie, Charlie was VP of Product Development at a leading travel management company, overseeing data and analytics, APIs, sustainability, and payment platforms. Now, as the force behind Vacation Genie, Charlie is focused on empowering savvy travelers and crypto enthusiasts, giving them more control over their travel planning and unlocking the benefits of digital currencies. Throughout his career, Charlie has been known for innovation, turning strategy into action, enhancing customer experiences, and driving sustainable growth. He's led teams across product, marketing, operations, and finance, and has also given back to the community, serving in leadership roles with organizations like the Boys and Girls Club of Cobb County in Georgia. We're thrilled to have Charlie with us today to share his insights on the future of travel and technology. Charlie, thank you so much for being here. It's awesome to reconnect.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. I really appreciate you asking me.
Absolutely, our pleasure. You know, Charlie, you and I worked closely together for a few years there, but some people in the audience may not know you quite as well. So do you mind, for the benefit of our audience, can you share just a bit about your journey and background? How did you get here?
Yeah, sure. Boy, that introduction did a pretty good job though, Joel. I almost didn't recognize myself. Exactly. So my journey in travel started in the GDS world in 1990. Almost my whole professional career has been in travel. Again, starting on the GDS side, I actually started in finance. I have a background in finance and economics and was part of the finance team that brought Galileo International, or Galileo, and Covea together as a GDS to create Galileo International, which then became part of Travelport. I was a junior member of the finance team on that deal. I think the only reason they had me on it was to carry the reams of paper back and forth, across the pond. But I kind of started in the GDS world and did that mostly on the finance side to begin with, and then moved from finance more into marketing and operational roles, again, with the GDSs. Left for a little bit, went to the American Medical Association, believe it or not, worked with them. It was the early days of the internet, and worked with Intel, a deal on Intel to do digital certificates for doctors. Remember, this is early internet. So this is, now we take doctor-patient communication and the privilege of that as, we take it for granted. Back then, you had to understand how you could really confirm you were speaking to your doctor and they were speaking to you. So we had a deal. The big thing I did at the AMA was that digital certificate deal. And that was really my first, hey, this internet thing is changing the world. What are some things we're going to have to do? Went from there to WorldSpan, which you mentioned in my bio. WorldSpan, another GDS, but a GDS that was well behind the leading GDSs at the time. And they saw the internet as really an opportunity for them to flip the script by really embracing the internet and enabling companies, the leading OTAs, or at the time, the term OTA wasn't even around, but there were people promoting travel on the internet. And we were fortunate enough to secure them as customers, and were able to really flip the script as part of WorldSpan. My role there was varied, got into marketing, operations, a little bit of sales, business development, et cetera, all trying to monetize that asset for our owners, which were the airlines. We were able to get that sold to private equity after the bubble. We initially wanted to go public, but after the bubble burst, it was best to find a different avenue to monetize for the owners. So we did that. left kind of the travel world for a while. I like to say I spent time with my kids when they wanted to spend time with me. So I spent some time doing some
That's a good time to
consulting.
do it, by the way.
It is because they listen after they reach a certain age. It's like, hey, Dad, I don't even want you around. So, uh, I did some consulting. I taught at a university. I taught an analytics class at a university, and then jumped back into the world of travel at Travelport, managing the IT relationships for Delta and United. Learned a lot about supplier relationships and IT and what it takes for an airline to run from an IT perspective. Moved then into commercial operations, and then a full product role trying to implement NDC, new distribution capabilities. Joel, you'll know what that is. Mike, you do as well, for the GDSs. Then took that on the road and did that managed NDC for a major travel management company. Joel, you and I have in common. And then ultimately managed my own product portfolio within the TMC, which included sustainability, payments, which is going to be important on the Vacation Genie side, data and analytics, and a few other travel agency-based products or agent-based products, pardon me. And then left there and came to Vacation Genie and really leveraging my payment background in Vacation Genie. So that's what landed me in Vacation Genie. Sorry, Joel, you asked me what time it was, and I built you a watch there. That might be, we're going to have to edit some of that.
It's a beautiful watch. We love it. And I wasn't aware of a ton of that. So thank you so much for sharing. It's awesome. And you obviously have a lot of experience in travel. And I know you also pay a lot of attention to the Web3 space. And I wonder for the folks listening, maybe can you give us a sense of how do you see Web3? Like, what is Web3 for someone in the audience who's maybe just hearing that term for the first time? How would Charlie Sullivan define Web3?
So it's interesting because before I got into the blockchain side of things at the Vacation Genie, I really wasn't aware of Web3 and what it was. But as soon as you start getting into blockchain and understanding crypto payments, et cetera, you start bumping up against that term. So I actually, Joel, had to do some research on it and, be able to look at, okay, Web3, I get it. Okay, Web 2.0, Web3, clever naming, I got it. But to me, Web3 was really about an interoperability and being able to leverage more disparate technology across your enterprise and do it in a decentralized and distributed way versus what's happening today is centralized. Now, I'm not the expert in this. Mike, I know you are. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what Web3 means to you because
no,
you're the expert.
Charlie. Well, I'm an enthusiast, probably more than an expert, but
I like that term.
I probably would give you more of a philosophical response to that because, in this space, first of all, people was going to ask if you talk about like Web3, and be like, well, what's Web 1 and Web 2? Like, what is the evolution of the internet? What's the evolution of the web? So like going back to when I first started using the internet, it's Web 1, where it's just us as consumers consuming content on the internet, web pages, static, right? So it's just read only, if you will. And then we go into Web 2, the rise of social media, where now we can contribute to the content. The general public can contribute to the content of the internet for us to consume. So we can post blogs, we can post videos, YouTube, etc. All the other social media platforms that used to be around where, you can post stuff and kind of share your experience and share your knowledge. So that becomes Web 2, read and write. I used to think solely Web3 is ownership, self-sovereign ownership of, let's say, for example, your data, your profile information. But in the last few months, and it really solidified more for me in the last few weeks, that Web3 now we're moving into where it's not just rewrite and own, but it's rewrite, own, and validate. And the reason why I say that is because one of the challenges that we're facing in society is, we're living in a world where we're really not sure what is real or fake anymore, right? I mean, with the rise of AI generated content in audio, video, and text, you're reading things sometimes on X or Twitter, and you're like, is this real? Is this true? And sometimes you have to ask Grok, hey, is this real or true? So there's so many negative use cases of AI generating voice clones. You got scam calls happening. Sometimes you can't really tell, like, am I really talking to Charlie? Because this person sounds really like Charlie and he's asking me to go to Home Depot and buy $1,000 gift certificates. Or, you have AI generated reports being used for policy making. And one big news that happened a few weeks ago, maybe it was like a week ago, was Deloitte in Australia got caught with a report that they were paid $400,000 or so to the Australian government to create this report that they were going to base some policies on. And then they found that this report had a lot of hallucination because it was referencing judges that either didn't exist or cases that didn't exist. And it was very embarrassing for Deloitte. It was on the news and they had to actually do a refund to the Australian government because of this. And then obviously, we've been around enough to know what deep fakes are. So there's a lot of negativity in terms of the impact that leads to everything from financial losses, emotional distress. You have a lot of spread of misinformation, manipulation, and confusion. So the reason why I'm bringing all this up is because in Web3, one of the key problems that was solved to enable blockchain technology is the Byzantine generals problem. And if you know how blockchain works, right, you have all these nodes that need to come into consensus in order for this transaction to be validated. So basically, blockchain, it's an immutable ledger. You have all the data that's being recorded, and it can't be altered unless there's consensus amongst, let's say, all the nodes that we run, right? So, for example, Bitcoin's blockchain, you have all these nodes that's distributed, processing everything to make sure that this blockchain ledger is true and accurate. Now, that's what we call proof of work for the Bitcoin blockchain and many other type of blockchains. But there's other type of blockchains and other type of consensus mechanisms, right? So there's proof of work is the very well-known one. There's proof of time, proof of authority, proof of ownership, proof of identity, proof of reputation, etc. And these all in a way is giving us like provenance and authenticity. And for us as humans, we're like, oh, okay, we can trust this ledger, but there is a major application for AI, I believe, right? For AI and AI agents. So how do you make sure that the AI agent is being trained on reliable data so that it's not hallucinating, it's not making up data? How do we make sure that there is validation around that? So in my mind, because of AI and the rise of AI agents and large language models and so forth, I think Web3 is really going to come into a space where it's not just rewrite and own, but also provides that verification mechanism for us to really know, hey, this is true data and it's fact and not, misinformation. So in my opinion, I think we're moving into the world where hopefully we have a major use case for Web3 technology in the application of AI and not just for crypto transactions and so forth. So a lot of other technology that Web3 brings, such as like smart contract, is going to help as well, because we live in a world where our human interaction, almost everything is based on contracts. And we can talk about that in travel as well, right? A lot of our travel is based on contracts, more or less. You make a reservation at a hotel, that's a contract between you and the hotel business, etc. So to keep it short, yeah, I think Web3 is, we own our own data, but we also have the ability for AI to be more true and accurate, and then for us to be able to know that there's authenticity behind it. So that's the short.
It's really interesting, Mike. For a long time, I had sort of seen AI over here and Web3 over there, and I'm kind of coming to similar maybe to what you're saying. I'm coming to a view that some aspects of Web3 are going to be foundational, maybe beyond what we currently quite imagine. And yeah, it seems like AI and agentic is kind of a natural fit for the kind of proof mechanisms that are available through Web3. So I think that's going to be a very fruitful intersection, maybe beyond what's currently widely seen, for sure. I'm curious, Charlie, what are you seeing in the Web3 space, whether it's cultural or technology-wise, or even philosophically? What to you is kind of the ethos of the Web3 space, and what are you noticing in that space as you do all you're doing with Vacation Genie?
So I see. So first of all, I like Mike's answer on Web3 better than mine. So let's use AI to make it sound like I gave a much better answer. I think that sounds better. And then I'll validate it. That sounds good to me, Mike. What I see, Joel, to answer your question is to me, there's a lot of activity going on in the blockchain space with regards to payments. And that's the piece that seems to have the most activity right now, from my perspective. Now, I'm biased because I'm working to enable crypto payments. That's what Vacation Genie is. At Vacation Genie, what we're doing is enabling customers to be able to pay for, right now, cruises using cryptocurrency. So my bias and my lens is kind of through that payment piece, but I see a lot of activity in that space on the payment side. And then I see there's a lot of discussion on some of the other areas like identity and self-sovereign identity and rewards. I don't see that as having as much of the momentum that the payment side has, whether it's Vacation Genie on kind of the leisure travel, or there's a company out there called Block Sky and what they're doing. I look at them as more of a payment platform play than a travel agency play. And Mike, you mentioned kind of that smart contract piece. And I've been in the industry for a long time. And one of the things that people consistently talk about is kind of this, and I'm going to say this hopefully politely, the convoluted commercial model that is travel and how money moves between suppliers to agents to consumers, et cetera. And I look at kind of blockchain and smart contracts and companies like Block Sky really having an opportunity to finally make the change to the commercial model and have it make sense, where the money flows where it should and how it should, and it's authenticated and validated. It's okay if I can go back to something Mike said. When I was working at the American Medical Association, we're talking about the early days of internet. The reason the American Medical Association, and so there was the digital certificate piece that I was involved in. There was also a concern, though, that American Medical Association, their kind of bread and butter is it's peer-reviewed medical research, right? So if it comes out of the AMA, it's gone through peer review, et cetera. The early days of the internet, you could basically put anything out there, medical advice, anything. And it wasn't validated, and the AMA is seeing themselves as the gold standard, with a gold standard of, peer-reviewed medical research, with all due respect to my friends in Europe and Lancet, right? They saw that as a real threat to, validated, peer-reviewed medical information and just the garbage that was getting put out there. So I see a lot of parallels to what you said, Mike, what's going on now with kind of AI being basically putting that on steroids, because it's not just textual. I can add a level of validation, putting bad information in a trusted person's mouth that they didn't say. So that to me, I I really like the addition of validate, Mike, on what you said. And I think
Absolutely,
it adds another use case. And Joel, I think the penny may have dropped for you as well, where you're talking about, you used to think them as two separate things, but this validation and stopping hallucinations and those kind of things could be tied to blockchain type technology. So it's really interesting. Joel, I don't know if I answered your question.
I just kind of want to go back to what Charlie was saying, because, I definitely, to elaborate on, it's kind of, if you look at Wikipedia as example, right, people can post things up there, and then you have consensus amongst us. We can go in there and say, hey, this is not accurate. Abraham Lincoln wasn't born in 2025. I'm going to fix this on Wikipedia, etc. Right? And then if you think about the reason why traditional finance has really adopted blockchain technology, it's because there's so much efficiencies behind it. And that's one thing I want to talk to you about as well, Charlie. It's like, why do you find payment interesting, and why is that a major use case? What are some of the reasons behind that? But of course, like for me, if I talk about why Web3 and AI is super interesting, it's just because, you talk about, for example, real world assets being tokenized, right? Okay, hey, Joel has a driver's license. I'm going to tokenize that, right? And now Joel needs to go buy something and prove that he's over 21 years old. But I don't necessarily want to show my driver's license to this person that needs to validate I'm over 21 years old, because it has all the other information that this person doesn't need to have in order for it to confirm that I'm of age. He doesn't need to know my address, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the other technology that I really, really like, and I think there's a lot of use case and value proposition for it, is zero knowledge proof, right? Where you can prove something without giving away all this other information that's unnecessarily provided. But in any case, Charlie, yeah, I think we'd love to dive a little bit deeper into, like, for Vacation Genie, for you, when you started getting into Web3 and you look at payment as one of the major focus areas, what was the reasoning behind that? Why payments?
The path I took on it was less about a technology and more about kind of a customer-centric view. And our view and my view is, particularly as it relates to online purchases and online purchases of travel, choice kind of breeds confidence. Confidence breeds sales or bookings. And when I have just a credit card path or a cash path, right? That's not giving, in today's world, that's not giving your consumers enough choice. And one of the things we looked at, particularly as it related to certain demographics, the millennials, the Gen Zs, is they actually own over 50% of all cryptocurrencies. They actually prioritize experiences well over tangible goods. They're also cruising much more than you would think that they were cruising. So when you look at that and you have a growing demographic in travel that's willing to spend on experiences, yet you're not meeting them and allowing them to pay through their preferred method of payment, right? So to me, taking that consumer first, it was like, I have a problem. How am I going to solve it? It wasn't, Mike and Joel, you guys have been around for a bit as well. Blockchain used to be a technology looking for a problem. I took this and said, I need to be able to offer this now. What are the solutions to be able to do this? And then it's, okay, do I want to do that in-house? Do I want to bring a payment platform in-house? Do I want to partner with somebody? So kind of classic build versus buy. And then what does that mean? Can I mitigate some of the risk? We're a smaller company. Holding crypto and living with that volatility, that's a little more risk than we want. So what are the partners we can partner with? So our view wasn't, hey, I have this technology. How can I use it in travel? It was, I have a use case, a specific use case to go after what we think is a great demographic and serve them where they want, when and how they want to be served. Did that answer your question, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. Totally. Because if I think back about, like, when I was in early 2000 hotel operations days, and I still remember when people were trying to first use, like, debit cards, and we're like, no, we don't accept debit cards. Like, people want to use their form of payment. And if you allow that, then you're going to open up the market a little bit bigger. And I think that's just the future, is to have that optionality as well. And you're capturing a particular demographic that's very exciting and very interested in being able to do this. And I think there's a lot of platform out there that prove this to be a use. So, for example, like Sleep.io, allowing, hotel and air booking using crypto. You have D-Travel, kind of like the Web3 version of Airbnb, to be able to do that as well. You got Travala also doing the same thing, kind of like the Web3 OTA. I mean, it'd be interesting if incumbent OTAs such as like Booking or Expedia and so forth are going to kind of get into, like, hey, let's also open up this form of payment as well, because there is a base there.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I wouldn't mention my competitors, but I think I have this kind of philosophy that it's very expensive to evangelize your own category. So having other folks like the folks you just mentioned, right, and Vacation Genie, all talking about the benefits of accepting cryptocurrency and why we went into it. It's not just a single group evangelizing kind of why this makes sense. There's more of us, right? So, you know,
absolutely.
That's my view on it. And then to dive just a little bit deeper, Mike, once you then open up, hey, I want to be able to do this. Well, you better know what you're talking about. So then the whole investigation of, okay, do you want to accept it yourself? Okay, what is the volatility risk? Okay, who are the partners that you can partner with? Great. What type of capabilities do they have? Which currencies can they do? How do you integrate it into your point of sale? All of those things. And how does, you guys know this because a travel transaction is different. It's just a little bit different. And sometimes you find that, the way that a workflow has been designed didn't account for travel, for example, right? And so then it's, okay, working with that vendor. Okay, this is how a travel transaction works. I need to be able to do this. I need to be able to potentially put a 24-hour hold on. I need to be able to do a refund here. Those kind of things. And you're working with your partner to be able to do it. And then you get even deeper. Each of those coins has its own risk. It has its own community, but it also has its own risk profile. And now with, I'm sure we're going to be talking about at some point, stable coins, right? With the Genius Act and stable coins kind of becoming front and center, that has a completely different risk profile. And do I want to do something different? So we have a payment platform that we use for all of our cryptocurrencies right now, including all of the stable coins. But we have to ask ourselves a question as we get further down the road. Do we actually need a payment platform provider for that, or can I take that in-house? And then there's partners to do that with. There's a company that I know that right now they launched in Brazil. They're going to be in the US next year. They have a fully decentralized payment platform for crypto, specifically for accepting stablecoins. And it's they're marketed under LiberPay, but they mint NFTs for the receipts as a merchant. It's a full custom model. There's no intermediary between me and my customer. I can duplicate that, and brings me a lot of flexibility if I want to treat a stablecoin transaction different than some of the other cryptocurrencies. So it's interesting, the innovation this is driving, and I'm really excited to see what that does. What it puts on me is, okay, great. I have to really, and what we think our secret sauce is this kind of orchestration layer at a payment level, right? So now I should be able to accept PayPal, Venmo, credit card, buy now, pay later, cryptocurrency. I should be able to separate my cryptocurrency by risk profile and which ones am I going to use a payment platform for, which ones am I going to hold, right? All of those things now you have to start to understand. It's fascinating to me.
I love
Sorry,
the way
I went
you're
off on a rant,
thinking.
guys. We can
No,
edit
not
that
at
out.
all. I love the way you're thinking about all this, Charlie. There's such clarity of thought, and I think you maybe don't even fully realize how at the vanguard of so many things you really are. Given that you're looking at it from kind of customer centricity as the lens, and it's kind of causing you to live at an intersection of Web3 and travel that maybe not everyone in the industry is standing at that particular spot. I'm curious, how much are you experiencing the tension of one arm being pulled this direction and the other direction? Or is it just like these partners of Web3 players and travel kind of understand each other without effort? Like, I'm just kind of trying to understand what's the tension level that you experience as you navigate that intersection.
I'm not seeing any tension, but between the two worlds. I think there's both sides can see each other's. There's some empathy there for it. So I don't see a tension to it. Tension, not attention. Tension to it. Really, I do see, again, the use cases more on the payment side. So momentum, that there may be a level of frustration associated with, hey, why aren't other things taking off? That could help validate this, but I don't see a tension. I think there's some early indicators, but I mentioned Block Sky earlier, that I think I'm looking at that to see, hey, if that's successful. And right now you see the press behind it. They look like they're being successful. I think people are looking at that and others in the space. You mentioned D-Travel earlier, Mike, kind of an alternative to Airbnb, or a Web3 alternative to Airbnb. Those names will start to become more in the public eye, I think. But I don't think there's a tension, Joel, between the two halves. I don't think so. When the internet came around, everybody was guarding their piece of the pie. Right. Oh my gosh, the internet's going to come around. The suppliers are saying, well, I don't necessarily want OTAs to take my business. I would like to have that myself. The GDSs themselves, because how they operate, the agency community, et cetera. I think there was a tension on how the pie gets separated. I don't see that. This is Charlie's opinion. Okay. I don't necessarily see that on the Web3 piece. What I see on the Web3 piece is more, I have a pain point. You tell me how Web3 can solve it. Not, hey, I'm trying to protect my slice of the pie, and I see this as a huge threat to me. Does that make sense, Joel?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the way you guys are seeing it is very proper, and I think it's best viewed as an enabler of some new possibilities, or maybe they shouldn't even be thought of new possibilities. Maybe they're old possibilities just now coming to fruition. But yeah, I love how you guys are looking at it. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, you were at a crypto conference not so very long ago. Can you give us a peek into that world and what you saw there?
Yeah, sure. So I was at the Litecoin and Bitcoin conferences 2 years ago in Nashville. And then I was at the Litecoin and Bitcoin conferences in Las Vegas. So just a real quick primer for folks. If you think of Bitcoin is, the crypto gold, Litecoin is seen as the silver to Bitcoin's gold, if that makes sense. It's faster and the fees are less than Bitcoin. So it's actually one of the coins that is heavily used in transacting and in commerce. It actually beats all other coins based on some BitPay survey information. So I went to both of those. I went to those conferences, different vibes or different folks on each one. The Bitcoin folks are very much, they're true believers. They don't necessarily play well with other coins. They see that coin is, why would you need another coin? So you have those folks. Litecoin, I think, is a little different than that. So the vibes are different. They get along. Bitcoin and Litecoin seem to get along. The vibes were different between the two conferences. Year over year, what I saw, Nashville to Las Vegas, was I felt the Las Vegas conference, there was a lot more enthusiasm at the conference and then at the Nashville conference. I felt people were very optimistic at the Las Vegas conference. The general vibe that we got. I was kind of in Nashville, just feeling it out, understanding the users, what their main pain points were in Nashville. In Las Vegas, we actually had a booth. We had booths at both and got to speak to a lot of folks about travel, Vacation Genie in particular, but travel in this space. Nobody in either of the conferences dissuaded me from, hey, this is it's a good opportunity, travel and crypto payments. So it was really good to see the year over year comparison, to see that really each of those coins has its own community. So it's not a one size fits all from a marketing perspective. And it was good to get some validating points and some things that we needed to work on and still are working on to really attract that crowd. So for me, it was a good conference. We brought a decent crew there, had some games at the booth and that kind of stuff. So
that's awesome, because first of all, I love that you're evangelizing travel as a use case in the Web3 world, going to these conferences and learning, but also talking to people about travel. Because like my personal experience, when in the last year, I went to two crypto conferences. One was the Ethereum conference in Zug in Switzerland, and then the other was Consensus in Toronto. And every time I go to these, I always like to ask people, what do they think about Web3 and travel? And then if you start, they typically will ask like, why? Like, well, how do you look at it? Because they don't really think about it that way, right? Because they always think about like, okay, the finance space, because that's been the dominant sector when it comes to Web3 and blockchain. But then if you start telling them, okay, hey, like you travel, you have your personal experience and you go to all these different, but here's the background or behind the scene a little bit, the amount of data that's out there, databases, the amount of intermediaries, all the different payment transaction that's going across, all the different type of contract that's are in place. What I think travel has, and the size of this market, right? Close to like globally, maybe it's going to be 11 trillion this year or so. So it's a huge market. And I think definitely Web3 is going to be a catalyst for innovation in this space. That's why it's so interesting. And for us, Joel and I, to be having conversation with different people in this space, either from travel or Web3 or both, to see more and understand more and learn more. So Charlie, when you talk about you going to these conferences and actually being boots on the ground, I'm very excited about that. And I would hope like a lot more travel leaders and innovators would also go and get a little bit of that experience as well.
Yeah, Mike, Joel, one of the things that, because I did a lot of press when I was in Vegas, not my favorite thing to do, as you guys know, but I did a lot of press. And one of the things that I kept on talking about was, to me, travel is the validating category for crypto payments. When you look at the size of it, which is what you just went through, Mike, and the utility of it and some of the value it brings, I think travel and crypto payments I think it's a validating use case to me. I've been in the industry a long time and I'm a student of history. And so I like to talk to people about, hey, where do you think traveler checks came from? They came because people wanted to travel. The first credit cards were for people to be able to travel, right? So this kind of piece of it, it's not new to travel. Travel has been at the forefront. Now, is travel pushing the innovation for crypto payments? No, there's others pushing that innovation, but we can certainly benefit from it. And like I said, from a consumer perspective, I think travel consumers are underserved right now. And as a collective, we could do better serving them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's going to be very interesting business model innovation that comes around as well because of the capability that we're seeing. But one other area, and this is just more of outside the box, and I've seen startups trying to do this, and I haven't seen a lot of traction, but I kind of want to get your thought, Charlie, on this as well, because personally, I think there's something here, which is travel inventory in the secondary market, right? So for example, I book on Vacation Genie for Alaska cruise, and last minute we can't make it or something, and then I have a platform where I can put this up, and this platform has some smart contract capability where there's automation behind the scene where I say, hey, I can't make this and I want to sell this because maybe the policy is like it's non-refundable, non-cancelable or whatnot. And I'm willing to take a 20% hit instead of a 100% hit. So I post up this reservation on the secondary market. And now Joel, he's like, hey, I'm thinking about going. And then I see, oh, there's already this booking and it's at a 20% discount than whatever else I can find online. Very interesting. Then goes it and books it. And obviously there's mechanics in the background. Maybe from a smart contract perspective, it automates everything, changes the reservation to Joel's name and process and orchestrates the payment and so forth. But overall, leveraging blockchain ledgers, storing the reservations and in the smart contract and so forth. From a secondary market perspective for travel, do you think that's something that is going to be interesting for suppliers and travelers? Because I've seen one model where the platform will do something where, okay, it's a 20% discount, but and as a supplier, you already captured that revenue from my booking, let's say. But now that second booking, that transfer of the reservation to Joel, the supplier gets, 5% addition on top of it. So I'm kind of thinking it's interesting, something maybe I could see being used. Maybe there is a potential where a supplier could say, well, we'll do a little bit more flexibility. Maybe they can adopt that as well. Just, I wanted to get your thought and your take on this from someone that's been in travel for so long, seeing the tech and both understanding of the supplier side as well.
So from a consumer side, boy, I could see that and go, wow, it would be great to have a secondary market for travel. How does that work for the supplier themselves? Because the suppliers absolutely are, there's a reason you can't do name change on tickets. Now there's a security reason for that, but there's a reason they don't allow it. There's a reason that for certain changes to itineraries to put a different name on it, for example, there's a charge that they do that. I think you'd have to figure out, I can see the use case from a consumer perspective, a secondary market for it. I think you'd have to unlock, okay, what's in it for the supplier that, because they're not going to want to dilute any of their yield. Like you said, they already got paid, but what does the secondary market create? Does it create any unintended consequences on my side? For example, right, I'm gonna take this use case way further than you wanted, but right now, one of the issues you have with concert tickets is the fact that somebody buys a big box of concert tickets, they buy them at the concert venue rate, right, at face value, and then nobody else can get them. And the secondary market winds up being so inflated, everybody's mad. So how do you prevent the entrepreneur from basically cornering hey, I have every room at Hilton, right? Because I've been able to accumulate it. So I think those things would have to be addressed, like the idea of a secondary market rather than the segment being unflown by the airline or the cabin being unused by the crews. I like that. The other thing you'd have to probably do is figure out, okay, there's also insurance that they're selling for that stuff right now, right? So there's a revenue stream already that the cruise companies, the airlines, everybody has their own kind of cancel for any reason, those kind of things. And now they've developed a revenue stream for that. And you might bump into that. So I like the idea from a consumer flexibility perspective. There's a lot of supplier stuff, which in my experience in travel, the suppliers drive or can control what can or cannot be, innovation can or can't happen. I mean, going back decades, right? Priceline's opaque model was, that was their answer to the airlines that, hey, you don't have to worry about the person, saying, hey, I got XYZ airline for, $100 less than everybody else, because it was opaque at the time when they first launched. It was, hey, I need to go Atlanta, Chicago, and okay, here, this is the price. Yeah, that price looks good to me. I don't know what brand it is though, right? Those are the things, those are the challenges I think you'd have to figure out. Certainly enabled by, the blockchain, right? Because of everything you said before, rewrite, own, and validate. So and the moving of the money can be done through that as well. So it's interesting. I smile just because you run up against the suppliers and you'd have to have a very willing supplier to do that. Now, again, one of I'd ask you to look at, there's a group called Plus Grade. I think they're out of New York. Mm-hmm. And Plus Grade, as I understand it, it's not exactly what you're talking about, but it's almost a secondary market for upgrades.
Okay. Like hotel room upgrades?
No, for air. It's for air.
Okay.
For air.
Well, I've always wanted to fly first class on a 380 and take a shower upstairs. So you have to see if that exists.
Yeah. And I think that there's another company similar to Plus Grade called Valencio that does, again, it's more on the upgrade side of it. And they allow you to sell upgrades or them to sell upgrades, which has been very successful for the airlines. So similar, not the whole kind of secondary market.
But I think it's a super important insight that you share, Charlie, because if anyone is looking to build, let's say, a secondary market or enable some innovation in travel, regardless if it's exactly the use case that we're talking about in a secondary market or something else, is that if you're going to work with incumbent travel providers, suppliers, and so forth, is you got to have that mindset of what is this in it for them? And then also, is this going to add operational complexity for them or not? Because if you're going to introduce something and you can say, you can actually make more and you don't have to deal with any of the, paperwork headaches and so forth, then that may be one barrier removed for you to get to the next stage. So I think that's a really important, like when you put on your, let's say, corporate innovator hat on and you're advising a potential startup, that could be one of those insights that you would, call on, right?
Yeah. It's interesting on kind of what advice would I give to startups? Oftentimes I'm the one looking for advice from the startups on how to accelerate things. But I was thinking about that. And to me, I don't know if you guys, this is a good discussion point. I don't know if you agree, but to me, especially in travel, there seems to be it's a copycat industry. It seems to be. So if somebody finds a better mousetrap, somebody else figures out how to duplicate it, right? Because the margins are thin. And if somebody can have a asymmetric advantage, right, I got to figure out how to close that advantage, right? And so to me, because of that, the advice I'd give isn't, don't feel that you're selling, hey, I have to sell to the whole airline industry. As an example, find a launch customer that's going to challenge you and help you grow your product and get to scale. Because if you're successful with a big airline, a big OTA, a big hotel brand, a big cruise brand, probably you're going to wind up being able to have discussions with the others because you've been successful. And if you can demonstrate that success. So to me, what I've seen is the ones that have been successful is they pick that launch customer. They don't try to be all things to all people. They concentrate on building out their product, not to be only that airline as an example specific, but with the minds of, okay, how am I going to take this to all the airlines? Because once you can formulate your product and your kind of value prop that sells, then you can go in and say, hey, listen, here's what I can do. I can demonstrate, I can increase your yield by this much, decrease your operational cost by this much. And here's an airline that's doing it right now. So to me, it's, don't worry about, hey, the airline industry is X trillions of dollars. I've targeted this airline because they have an absolute culture of and reputation of partnering well with innovators. And that to me is the advice I'd give.
Yeah.
I don't know if that
yeah.
makes sense.
No, absolutely. Because Charlie, you talk about like startup. When I look at it through the lens of like, say, Vacation Genie, right? It's almost like it's a startup as well, right?
Yep.
You kind of you have this idea and you kind of have to like evangelize and grow and get it through the process. Is that a very similar approach, like internally, when you're trying to innovate internally? How did you go about essentially, like, how did Vacation Genie come about? I mean, you talked about what is Vacation Genie cruise platform for now, enabling crypto payments, targeted market, and so forth. But I'm curious, like, when did that light bulb go off for you? And then how did you get it to the point where it's at now?
Really, it started more as a kind of a market. It started as a question on the corporate side, actually. Can we take advantage of blockchain for some of our corporate travel? So some corporate travel that was being done. Does it validate in corporate? And it kind of, for a number of reasons, that's not going to work for what we wanted that we want to do, et cetera. But on the leisure side, and at the same time, leisure, okay, let's analyze this. And then you start looking at, Joel, this stuff from an innovation perspective as well. What are the trends that are happening and where do these trends kind of intersect? And so what we found was, like I said early on, cruise, crypto, and were two of the big trends that were intersecting. When, okay, great. Now, how do I internally get buy-in on that? And honestly, on the crypto side, the biggest piece was kind of some of the myth busting around cryptocurrency, right? What is cryptocurrency? How does a Bitcoin even get valued? Those kind of things were, okay, I get why you'd want to accept another form of payment, let's say PayPal, but why crypto? And so we really had to address the why crypto piece and what that meant. And that was the intersection I mentioned earlier, that target market. And so it kind of, okay, I can see it. And then it starts to build momentum. I stopped getting, I'd get an email every time there was crypto in the news that, something, some malfeasance happened. And you really want to get into this? And it'll be like, okay, let's dig into this. And so I actually put together a Mythbuster document related to like cryptocurrency and those kind of things, and started educating people on that demographic. And then understand that. Let's continue to move forward. And then what you've seen more recently is there's less negative news on crypto and the Genius Act, for example, on stable coins. That added some guardrails and some definitions behind, and that I think added to the legitimacy of it. So then I see what you were talking about. I'm glad, those kind of things. So it's been a journey, an internal journey, educating folks internally. The suppliers, because from a supplier perspective, we've insulated them from, they're not accepting crypto, right? They're like, okay, great. what they see is just a regular transaction, right? So it doesn't interrupt their flow at all. So we've seen, and some of the cruise lines have really embraced, yep, we understand what you're doing here. We'd like to keep in touch with you, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah. Internal
Charlie, you're reminding me of an adage about innovation and the willingness to be misunderstood for long periods of time. And it's like funny to stand. You can go stand in a cornfield somewhere and say, this is the spot. And it's time and tide that reveals that you're actually standing in Manhattan. But, there's a long period, sometimes it can be a month or 10 years or longer, where you're standing somewhere where people go, why would they stand there of all places? But I think my opinion, for what it's worth, is that sticking to your guns. If you really believe you're standing where you should be standing, just hold your ground and let time catch up to you. So I think you just gave the audience kind of a case study in how to show a bit of courage, even in a world where maybe there are more questions than answers at first. So just thank you for that. If you don't mind, you mentioned stablecoins. I'd love to get your take, Charlie, on how important are they to the future of travel commerce? Are they a sideshow, or are they the main event, or what? How big a deal are stablecoins?
It's interesting. Mike and I have had separate conversations on this, and I know Mike wrote a paper on it as well. When I look at stable coins, to me, the biggest benefit is it takes the volatility conversation away. That's a huge, when people talk about Bitcoin or Litecoin or any of the others, especially over, I don't know when this is going to air, but if you look at what it's done recently, right? It's a roller coaster. When you look at stable coins, you don't have that volatility. Then you're just looking at what's the utility of that coin, right? The utility of a stable coin, because you're not going to see the wild swings that you may see on it. And probably if people are buying stable coins there, I don't know if they're doing it as kind of investment as much as they bought it intending to transact with it, if that makes sense, Joel. So to me, I'm almost looking at stable coins as like the gateway coin for people to use other coins, because it's like, oh yeah, I've used stable coins. Oh, you mean I can use some of my Litecoin profits to pay for stuff too? Oh, and it's as simple as it was with stable coins. Yes. So I almost look at it as ushering in, like I said, it's the gateway. It could be the gateway coin for transactions. And I think you're going to see, Joel, I'm pretty sure I'll have this straight. I'm sure the blame it on I'm having an hallucination if it's wrong. People have hallucinations too. I believe Amazon, Walmart, PayPal already has a stable coin, right? I think people are going to start hearing other kind of major merchants start talking about releasing their own stable coins, which will bring other press to it as well. And people will start to get to know that based on how much they buy on Amazon or Walmart or what PayPal happens to be doing. So yeah, I'm happy that the Genius Act piece, again, because I think we needed those guardrails and definition. But I also think it's one of those things that, could usher in transactions. And it's why we selected the payment platform that we're on right now, because it does accept stable coins, and why we're looking at the company that I talked about earlier, because that's kind of an opportunity to separate what we want to do, what we could do with stable coins, with the other things that hold a different risk profile. Joel.
Very cool. And just a bit of just maybe a related context. You talked earlier about the tendency for it to be a bit of a copycat industry where somebody gets a little bit of advantage and then quickly, how do you close that gap? And that's the way they would think, is close the gap. And I guess for what it's worth, for anyone tuning in, I just will offer maybe that close the gap mindset isn't exactly suited to the times. I think it's more of a look yourself with your own eyes and look around and see what's possible, and maybe find things that can be done that maybe weren't possible yesterday, and do them whether anyone else is doing them or not. And I think I'd love to see the industry kind of flourish in the sense of more differentiated innovation. And I think it takes just a bit of a mindset shift and a bit of courage. And I'm so glad we're talking to you, because I think Vacation Genie is exhibit A of that kind of courage. So it's so great to have you here. This is an unfairly challenging question, Charlie, but I'm going to dare to ask it anyway. So you're putting on your visionary hat, and
Charlie, the futurist.
That's right, Charlie, the futurist, futurologist, as a colleague of mine used to say. And I wonder if you could try to give us a glimpse, maybe 3 or even 5 years ahead. If you're at the intersection of Web3 and travel, what might that look like in a few years, and what new possibilities might emerge that maybe are a bit of a gleam in the eye at this point, but nevertheless plant a few seeds for the audience's enjoyment?
So 3 to 5 years, of course, Vacation Genie is wildly successful.
Of course.
That goes
It's a
without saying,
given.
right? So that's a given. It's wildly successful. I think in kind of that horizon, I think the particularly as it relates to the smart contracts that Mike talked about in some of the early use cases that are going right now, and the kind of the proof of concepts that are moving more into kind of production and scalability, in 3 to 5 years, those will be proved out. And to me, what I'd not necessarily as a futurist, but something I would love to see is that commercial model that right now I said was convoluted start to be untangled in that time frame, and really have what I would consider a more rational commercial model associated with the distribution and sale and distribution of travel, because I think that piece of it, the foundation of that, is happening right now. And so that use case, I think, should be past the hype cycle and what's the trough of uncertainty or
Disillusionment, I believe.
disillusionment, right? And we should be into some early adopters of that have proven that it does work, and we're starting to see a different commercial model emerge that's been facilitated by this technology. I do think, I think for the reasons Mike mentioned on kind of identity, I think you're going to see that identity piece be a use case probably before rewards. Rewards, I think you have to, especially with some of the reward programs and points programs, that's a well-oiled machine in a lot of the brands, and how they did that I don't think is a 3 to 5 years. That I think you're probably swimming upstream. But on the identity and taking control of your identity and using that to prove I'm 21 to do this, or I need to prove I'm Joel. I don't need to prove I'm Joel living in Alaska. You don't need to know I live in Alaska. You don't need to know all of this other stuff that comes with my identity. I'll only share with you what I need to transact the business. I think that's going to become more and more important. And the piece that we talked about it kind of collided earlier, and we didn't talk about it. AI is going to have a gigantic impact on this as well, on travel, on Web3, whether it's Web3 facilitating the mitigation of hallucinations or whatever. I think AI piece, Joel, I think over the next 3 to 5 years you may even see a morphing of kind of that term Web3 and AI, and the AI piece of it, because for the reasons Mike mentioned earlier, that validation piece is so big, right? I mean, it's so huge. And how can you do that in an environment that it's so easy to manipulate things from an AI perspective, right? So you probably think you're going to see some convergence of that in the next 3 to 5 years. Again, I'm not a futurist.
I love it.
Getting there, though. Getting there.
A little. No, I think you are, in fact, our futurist in chief for this episode for sure. And bringing us back a little bit to the present, maybe your new role could be a little bit of a translator, if you will. What if you had to sort of tell the Web3 community one thing about travel based on all your experiences in travel? What might you want them to understand? And conversely, what would you want to tell the travel folks about the Web3 world? So you're kind of bridging cultures to the extent there's a bridge to be created. And what would be your take on that?
Here's what I would say. I have a friend of mine that was outside of travel and then got into travel, right? And just from Greenfield, just saw a potential need, started developing it. And he made this comment, and I think it's true. Travel is an industry of edge cases. So you can go down rabbit holes really, really quick, trying to solve down to the nth degree. I would say lift yourself up out of that and and don't get dragged into that as an innovator. Understand that not necessarily the 80-20 rule, but understand where your sweet spot is. I'd also say if I was an innovator in the travel space, you're going to need to do some investment in the knowledge, getting a knowledge base of travel. There's a lot of legacy infrastructure and IT in travel that could prevent some of the things you want to do. So those kind of things I think are important to understand, because if you're pitching, you want to pitch knowing some of the hurdles that you're talking. You don't want to add operational complexity to any supplier. They're just going to say no. Even they tend to not chase revenue as much as they make sure they're as efficient as they can be. So I would say, from my perspective, do your homework, understand the environments you're going to operate in, and recognize that travel, has a lot of edge cases, so to speak. And it's good to really understand kind of what that workflow is before you try to pitch somebody. That's what I would say. And then on the other side, the kind of the incumbents on the travel side, I think to me, the biggest thing is there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on, a lot of really interesting stuff. And my fear is that because travel has a potential reputation for not being innovative, for being difficult, for having legacy infrastructure, right? So integrations making it more difficult. That kind of wave of innovation potentially passes it by because it's just, hey, listen, I have open doors I'm knocking on, right? I can make a great living without touching travel. I think so. To me, it's incumbent on travel incumbents. Sorry about that. You can edit that out. AI will fix it.
Happy find. I like it. It's a happy find.
To me, really, the incumbents in travel should absolutely be seeking out what's happening that's relevant in their space and being receptive to that, recognizing that we might not have a great reputation for current innovation. I'm not saying future or previous innovation. And if you want this innovation to happen in your industry, travel, I do, go out and start talking to the innovators, talk to the startups, understand what's applicable and what's not, and be active in it, and make sure that those innovators know that travel is a great space to be in, because I think it is. We're a validating category for some things, as I've said, but that's to me how it works. One, do your homework before you knock on doors and really understand, what the pain points are. And on the other side, open up, do your own research, actively participate in the innovation. That's what I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hopefully that makes sense.
I'll give you a really good example of someone that kind of exemplifies a lot of what you just said, Charlie. A few years ago, I met Martin Gauss. He was the CEO of Air Baltic, and we were in Silicon Valley talking about, crypto, Web3, and travel. And Air Baltic was one of the very first airline, I think, starting from, I might misquote this, but I think like 2014, they allowed Bitcoin as a payment method, right? And then when he started talking to me about NFTs and how he was looking at NFTs to augment their loyalty rewards program, I thought it was super interesting. Then I find out that he's actually going to these, I think he went to like NFT LA or NFT New York. He went to this NFT conference himself to like boots on the ground, talking to the technologists, talking to the vendors, understanding the space and so forth. And then a few months later, they made the announcement of their Planey program, which is augmenting their loyalty. So you can buy a Planey NFT, if you will, and you can buy more than one. But depending on what level you go to, it opens up more opportunities for upgrades or early access to discounts and so forth, right? So, but exactly to the point you say, I think a lot of the innovators or leaderships in travel, they could, I think maybe a lot easier right now because you can just go to an AI, start asking, getting curious and start asking questions, like, hey, this is what I do and how can I apply what are the use cases, what are the value propositions, and so forth, and started getting into that rabbit hole, which it sounds like, Charlie, that you fell into pretty hard, is that Web3 crypto rabbit hole. That's great. And I think the ones that you went to, are there any, from your experience as a travel leader, are there any Web3 conferences you would think like, okay, hey, if you really want to learn something, this is the one that what are the resources that really helped you?
It's interesting. I got this. I had this question on another podcast, and one of the things that I've found on the crypto side and on the Web3 side, because I've talked to the principal over at D-Travel as well, is what I've found is this community is really good at sharing. So it's, to me, first develop a network, do your research, but then I can't remember, Mike, if you introduced me or not, but that was a single email.
Cynthia. Yeah.
It was a single email, basically a blind introduction, asking a question for some help. And she was gracious enough with her time. Right. And I find that this community is important, and I would drill into it. That piece of it on the crypto side, the guys at Litecoin, guys and gals at Litecoin have been great. The individual coin communities, that they're more than happy to open their network up. Same thing with Cynthia at D-Travel. So that piece of it, that, like I said, it's a community. Now, again, there's competitors within the community. I get that part of it, but opening up their network and doing your own investigation. The conferences, there's a conference, you mentioned it, in Toronto. They also have it in Miami.
Was Consensus?
Consensus. I think Consensus is in Miami as well.
Yeah.
That's one that I'm looking at. I think that's in November this year. November and December in Miami.
Do you think, I know right now, like obviously in the last few years, AI has been the biggest kind of focus in terms of like innovation in tech and travel conferences, WTM or ITB, maybe high tech, maybe World Aviation, etc. Like some travel conferences, there's a lot of focus. Right now we're seeing a lot more like Innovation Alley, where they're kind of spotlighting startups. They're doing like, startup competitions and so forth. In past few years, there's been some focus on blockchain technology, but obviously that kind of shifted to AI. That's the dominant theme. Do you think there should be a little bit more, or do you think there will be more focus on blockchain as we start having more tailwind versus headwind? Because as you mentioned earlier, there's more regulatory clarity, there's more adoption. It seems like it's getting more validated. It's a maturing technology, if you will. So if you could, would that be kind of a theme? You could like say, okay, hey, I would like to see more of this on the travel side in terms of conferences.
Oh, for sure. For sure. It would be great. And as we talked about, I think that the AI and the convergence of AI and some of the enabling validation piece that Web3 could bring to AI, particularly in travel. So, you're getting validated information. Yeah, I could see that convergence. Web3, we know each other individually. This is kind of the first time we talked together like this. I think Web3 could probably, it's great. It's three letters and a number. So it's pretty easy, but it could probably benefit from either rebranding or more succinct messaging. Because right now it's almost like one of those Rorschach blotches. It's just, you put it up and you go, what's Web3 mean to you? And I completely botched it earlier in the conversation. I think it would be good to really have, this is the value proposition. This is what it means. And I think you're kind of, and I'm looking at my notes, read, write, own, validate component of it. And that kind of underpinning of it. I think Web3 was some sort of, this is what it is. And then, okay, now within travel, what does that mean? But Web3, again, if you ask three different people what it is on this call, I think we would have all had three different definitions. I like yours the best, Mike, but that's my view. I'd love to see it to again, bring that community together. What are the use cases? Get suppliers to talk about what their primary pain points are. again, I think that commercial piece would be big, it'd be huge across the whole piece. So again, just my opinion.
No, amazing. Yeah, no, absolutely love it, because I think that's one of the main reasons why Joel and I started, when we're talking about like, why are we doing a podcast called Travel Around the Block, and why are we exploring the intersection of AI and Web3 technology and how it applies to travel, is because, just like you said, Charlie, is there's a lot of demystifying education that I think needs to go out there in travel, not just for the incumbent, it's for the innovators, for the investors, and so forth, and how they look at it. So having someone like you, where you have this breadth and depth of travel technology and distribution experience, and then now leveraging that for what you're trying to innovate in, it's amazing to see, and I'd love to see more of it. And that's why I think Vacation Genie is super, super interesting. With Vacation Genie, I do want to ask, and if it's something that you can't share yet, feel free, play things close to the chest. But where is it, obviously right now, cruise, crypto payment, get it. What are we going to expect in, let's say, a year or two from now? What is your, overall vision for Vacation Genie?
So a year or two, within a year. So within a year, what I would expect is you'll see kind of a full product suite. So not only cruise, but you'll see hotel, tour, car. Right now, the air piece of it, just because of how air is sold, and some of the transaction pieces on that, transactional pieces, and how offers and orders and all that other good stuff. We have air is kind of our last piece of it. Hotel is next up. As soon as we get some transaction through, I already have it. It's actually already developed. It's behind a firewall to be tested, but we need to get cruise. I need to prove out cruise before I start spending on the hotel side, and then move that. Air for us right now is last, just because there are some unique challenges to that we feel the other ones are easier for us to do at first and more relevant.
Makes sense. Yeah, makes sense. Awesome. Amazing. Well, obviously everybody can learn more about Vacation Genie by going to vacationgenie.com. Is that right?
Yep. Vacationgenie.com. Yep.
Awesome. And I was just going to say, Charlie, it's so great to have you here. We're grateful for you spending the time. And I think we heard so many great insights, but we barely scratched the surface of all the ways that you're an awesome human being. So if I may just tease your next appearance on the podcast, we'll start with your life as a softball coach. And I remember sitting across from you at an industry event where you were telling me a little bit about the art of pitching a softball, and what you shared with me that day was rather indelible. So kudos, my friend, for everything you're doing at Vacation Genie. It's always great to catch up with you. And if for anyone in the industry who hasn't spent time with Charlie, nicest person in the industry, bar none. And so have a great rest of your day, Charlie. Thank you so much for being here.
Great talking to you guys. Love it.
Thanks so much, Charlie. That's great. And then we'll have to know if we're going to call you Dr. Sullivan next time.
Exactly.
But seriously, Charlie, this is amazing. I love it. A lot of great insights, great conversation, and we need more evangelists and kind of like futurists in the industry. So yeah, definitely see that. Hopefully soon we'll have you on again. We'll talk more about all the other things that you guys are doing, and maybe some of the things happening in the Web3 space as well.
Hey, my calendar is open for you guys.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Charlie.
Great. We'll see
Have
you
a great one.
Thanks for joining Joel and Mike for another episode of Travel Around the Block. If you have any questions or topics you would like to see discussed on the show, or if you'd like to be considered as a potential guest or sponsor, please reach out to us at hello@travelaroundtheblock.com. And of course, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Wishing you a wonderful day wherever you are around the block.